Hi there, welcome to the segment Merciful Truth on Borderlink Reporters TV, where we bring to you some hidden truth around the globe. Please, do well to subscribe, get the latest news and grow our channel. Today, we'll be talking about reasons why is Africa turning away from the United States. Whoa, wake up America. Africa's not a country, it's a continent on the move. Africa is changing, fast. It's time for the U.S. to wake up and smell the coffee, or better yet, the delicious Ethiopian yirgacheffe. For too long, America has treated Africa like a problem to be solved, a place for charity, or a single country. Newsflash, it's a continent with 54 diverse nations, each with its own story, its own challenges, and its own massive potential. We're talking a young and booming population, rich resources, and a growing middle class. This ain't your grandparents' Africa. This is a continent on the rise, and the rest of the world knows it. Africa is no longer a continent defined solely by poverty, conflict, and humanitarian crises, as it has often been portrayed in Western narratives. Today, Africa is one of the fastest-growing regions in the world, both economically and demographically. It is home to a population of 1.4 billion people, the majority of whom are under the age of 25. By 2050, Africa's population is expected to double, making it a critical hub for global labor, innovation, and markets. China's been investing heavily for years. Russia's trying to get back in the game. Even your weird uncle who still collects Beanie Babies is probably thinking about buying property in Cape Town. The U.S. needs a new strategy, one that recognizes Africa's dynamism and its agency. Let's ditch the outdated stereotypes and the condescending lectures. It's time to engage with Africa on its own terms, as an equal partner, not a charity case. This ain't just about helping Africa, it's about the U.S. Own interests in a rapidly changing world. The continent's rich reserves of natural resources such as cobalt, lithium, and rare earth elements have become even more valuable in the global economy, especially with the transition to clean energy and the rise of electric vehicles. Countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, hold over 60% of the world's cobalt reserves, a key component in lithium-ion batteries. This puts Africa at the center of the global supply chain for green technologies, driving interest from global powers like China, the U.S., and the European Union. Alright, let's address the dragon in the room. China's been making significant strides in Africa, and it's not just for the photo ops. We're talking about major infrastructure projects, from roads and railways to ports and power plants. China's investing heavily in Africa, and they're forming alliances with governments that the U.S. might hesitate to engage with. Some in the West are quick to criticize, calling it debt trap diplomacy and neo-colonialism. But let's be clear, African nations are savvy. They recognize a beneficial deal and aren't afraid to negotiate tough terms.
China's offering loans, investments, and infrastructure, often with fewer conditions than Western donors. Over the past 2 decades, China has dramatically expanded its presence in Africa, building roads, railways, ports, and other infrastructure projects across the continent. This has been part of China's broader Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, which seeks to connect Asia, Europe, and Africa through massive infrastructure investments. China-Africa trade reached a record $261 billion in 2021, 5 times more than U.S. Africa trade. African leaders often praise China's no-strings-attached approach to partnerships, which contrasts with the conditionalities attached to Western aid and investment, such as demands for political reforms or human rights improvements. One of the most notable examples of China's influence is Ethiopia, where Chinese investments have transformed the capital, Addis Ababa, into a bustling hub of infrastructure development. China financed the construction of the African Union's headquarters and has built major transportation projects, including the Addis Ababa-Djibouti Railway. This type of investment has positioned China as a partner that is focused on development and economic growth, regardless of the political system in place. The US can't just outspend China to compete. They need a more strategic approach, focusing on quality, sustainable development, and mutually beneficial partnerships.
Let's be honest, America's history in Africa is far from perfect. The U.S. supported dictators, interfered in elections, and put our strategic interests above the needs of African people. Remember the Cold War? Africa was a proxy battleground, and it was devastating. America backed some questionable regimes to fight communism. And then there's the aid issue. Sure, we provide a lot of aid, but it's often tied to benefits for American companies or to advance U.S. foreign policy goals.
It's time for a new strategy. one based on mutual respect, shared prosperity, and a true commitment to Africa's long-term development. The United States has traditionally approached Africa from a perspective of aid and security, often framing its engagement in terms of counterterrorism, humanitarian assistance, and political reforms. However, this approach has increasingly come under scrutiny for its failure to adapt to Africa's changing realities. Unlike China, which prioritizes infrastructure and trade, the U.S. is often seen as focusing more on issues like governance, human rights, and security, sometimes at the expense of economic partnerships. A glaring example of the U.S.'s failure in engagement with Africa is former President Donald Trump's infamous derogatory comments about African nations. In a 2018 meeting at the Oval Office when discussing immigration issue, Trump used a vulgar language by referring to African nations as shithole countries, a statement that drew widespread condemnation both internationally and within the U.S. The comment not only strained diplomatic relations with African countries, but also reinforced the perception that the U.S. views Africa through a lens of disrespect and disdain. This was not an isolated incident. During Trump's administration, U.S. policy towards Africa appeared indifferent at best and hostile at worst. Unlike China, which was building partnerships and investing in Africa's infrastructure, the U.S. under Trump was seen as disengaged and uninterested in fostering meaningful relationships with African nations. Trump's travel ban, which included several African countries, further alienated African leaders and contributed to the perception that the U.S. was not a reliable partner. Moreover, U.S. foreign policy in Africa has been marked by inconsistency and lack of sustained engagement. For instance, the Trump administration's focus on countering China's influence in Africa did not translate into a coherent policy or significant investment in African development. President Joe Biden's administration has shown interest in re-engaging with Africa, but the U.S. faces an uphill battle in regaining trust and influence in the region. Biden's U.S. Africa Leaders Summit in 2022 aimed to reset the relationship, but many African leaders remain skeptical of the U.S.'s commitment to long-term partnerships.
Hold up, did someone say Cold War nostalgia? Russia's back in Africa trying to relive its glory days. They're offering military hardware, nuclear energy deals, and a healthy dose of anti-Western rhetoric. From Mali to the Central African Republic, Russia's been making friends and influencing people, often by cozying up to regimes that the US and Europe have shunned. Now, Russia's pockets might not be as deep as China's, but they're making up for it with their military might and their willingness to play the spoiler. The US can't ignore Russia's resurgence in Africa. We need to offer African countries a better alternative, one that focuses on new deals, partnerships, and mutual growth, steering clear of mercenaries, disinformation campaigns, or a return to Cold War rivalries. Section 5. Beyond China, Russia, and the US, Africa's got options.
Here's the thing, folks. This ain't a two-player game anymore. Africa's not just a pawn in a geopolitical chess match between superpowers. They've got options, and they're not afraid to use them.
Turkey's been stepping up its game, investing in infrastructure and expanding its diplomatic footprint. The European Union, despite its internal squabbles, remains a major player in Africa, particularly in terms of trade and development assistance. And let's not forget about the Gulf states, with their petrodollars and their growing influence.
Africa's becoming a multipolar continent, and that's a good thing. It means more competition, which can be a driver for better deals and more sustainable partnerships. The U.S. needs to up its game and offer something unique if it wants to stay relevant in this increasingly crowded field.
Section 6. What Africa wants, respect not handouts.
Here's a novel idea. Why don't the US ask African countries what they actually want? Shocking, I know. But instead of rolling in with our pre-packaged solutions and America we know best attitude, maybe the US should listen for a change. African nations are tired of being patronized. They don't need lectures about democracy from countries that can't even seem to run their own elections without a conspiracy theory or two.
They want respect, they want agency, and they want partnerships based on mutual benefit. They want investment, not just aid. They want access to markets, not just handouts. They want to be treated as equals, not as charity cases. They want the US to stop interfering into their political affairs and imposing puppet leaders who serve only the interest of the West and not the common man.
It's not that complicated, folks. Just treat people the way you want to be treated. It's a concept they teach in kindergarten, but apparently, some world leaders missed that lesson.
Section 7, Trade not Aid. Time for a real economic partnership.
Okay, let's talk business. Africa's got what the world needs: resources, talent, and a growing market of consumers. The U.S. needs to stop treating Africa like a charity case and start seeing it as a valuable economic partner. We're talking about trade, not just aid. We're talking about investing in sectors that create jobs and boost economic growth, like agriculture, technology, and renewable energy.
Let's be real, handouts aren't going to lift a continent out of poverty. Sustainable economic development, that's the key. And that means creating opportunities for African businesses and entrepreneurs to thrive. It means leveling the playing field and making sure that trade deals are fair and mutually beneficial.
It's time to move beyond the old model of donor and recipient and embrace a new era of economic partnership.
Section 8. Investing in Africa's future education, technology, and innovation. Africa's got the youngest population on the planet. That's a huge asset, but only if those young people have the skills and opportunities they need to succeed.
The U.S. can play a key role in investing in Africa's future by supporting education, technology, and innovation. We're talking about scholarships for African students to study in the U.S. And no, not just in basket weaving and African studies. How about some STEM fields?
We're talking about partnerships between American and African universities to develop cutting-edge research and technology. We're talking about supporting African entrepreneurs and innovators who are creating the next generation of game-changing companies. Section 9. Security and stability, addressing the root causes. Some critics pointed out that the U.S. and the West are causing instability and conflicts in Africa in order to exploit the vast natural resources in the region. Let's not sugarcoat it. Africa faces real security challenges: terrorism, conflict, and instability.
The US has a role to play in addressing these threats, but not by simply throwing money at the problem or sending in the troops. They need a smarter approach, one that focuses on addressing the root causes of conflict and instability. That means promoting good governance, strengthening democratic institutions, and supporting economic development.
It also means working with African partners to build effective and accountable security forces that respect human rights. We can't just focus on military solutions to complex problems. America needs a comprehensive approach that tackles the underlying factors driving conflict and instability. Section 10. The diaspora advantage, tapping into a powerful bridge. Here's a secret weapon in the U.S.'s arsenal: the African diaspora. We're talking about millions of people of African descent living in the U.S., entrepreneurs, doctors, scientists, artists, and yes, even a few talk show hosts.
This diaspora represents a powerful bridge between the U.S. and Africa. They bring cultural understanding, business acumen, and a deep commitment to the continent's development. The U.S. needs to do a better job of tapping into this incredible resource.
We're talking about supporting diaspora-led businesses, facilitating investment from the diaspora back to Africa, and creating opportunities for diaspora professionals to share their skills and expertise. The diaspora is an asset that's often overlooked, but it's time to unleash its full potential. Section 11. A new era for U.S.-Africa relations, from patronage to partnership. It's time for a reset in U.S.-Africa relations. The old model of patronage and paternalism is outdated and ineffective. Africa is not looking for a savior, it's looking for a partner.
The U.S. has a chance to forge a new kind of relationship with Africa, one based on mutual respect, shared interests, and a genuine commitment to partnership. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. It will require a fundamental shift in thinking, a willingness to listen and learn, and a commitment to engaging with Africa on its own terms.
The U.S. needs to step up its game. The world is changing, and Africa is at the forefront of that change. The question is, will the U.S. be a relevant and respected partner in this new era, or will we be left behind? Wondering what happened? The choice is theirs. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned and make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Borderlink Reporters TV. Bye and stay blessed.